Hello, and welcome to the 2025 Ice Palace Competition Build Lecture for 825 Arts. My name is Sarah Smith, and I'm the Minecraft coordinator for 825 Arts. And this is Bob Olsen, preeminent scholar on ice palaces and returning triumphant lecturer for this fantastic lecture series.
That's
Hi,
very
Bob.
scary, Sarah. Thanks a lot.
We like to build you up. That way you can only fly.
Hey, everybody, it's great to be here again. We're taking a little bit of a detour from the past presentations we have done on Ice Palace history. We're calling this one the Towers of University Avenue for the 2025 Minecraft Ice Palace build. We're doing it because in the past we've done a lecture on the history of ice palaces, but I kind of wanted people to think about an ice palace build a little bit differently. But if you need that background information on the history of all of the St. Paul ice palaces, you can do that by visiting this tiny URL that's on the screen right here underneath the picture of the 1886 palace. That'll take you to a spot where you can kind of look at all the different things that I've talked about in the past. So why the Towers of St. Paul? Well, it occurred to me that ice palaces in general are essentially buildings with towers in them. And why towers? I mean, I think you kind of have to go back and say, what is it that towers do? And so we have pictures here of the First National Bank Tower in downtown St. Paul, the Tower of Babel, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the Genoan family towers in Italy, where they competed against how tall the towers of each family could be, the Chrysler building in downtown St. Paul, the pencil skyscrapers that are around New York City's Central Park, and the IDS and Wells Fargo towers in downtown Minneapolis. Lots of different kind of tower presentations, way of expressing height, but it's not really expressing height, it's expressing prestige. There was something in the way that people think about towers that's really about, I want to show people how important I am. And so when we look in St. Paul's history and towers, we can see the very first tower of the second Minnesota State Capitol building. On the top left there, on the top right, is the old Montgomery Ward's warehouse along University Avenue. That was actually there when I was a kid, as was the Brown and Bigelow building here at the bottom, which was a printing company along University Avenue. Each one of those towers had a different function. The Capitol building tower was really about showing how important Minnesota was as and St. Paul as the capital of the state. The Montgomery Ward's tower is actually a water tower that housed the big water tank for all of the things that they did in that department store. And the Brown and Bigelow towers were also water towers, but there are two of them. So they must have been doing a lot of work there. There are towers that still exist along University Avenue that kind of keep up that history. You have what was the original Old Home Creamery building, which is, I think, near the corner of Victoria and University, isn't it, Sarah? I think it's like right in there.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Yeah. And then this is the Coffin building, which is right now being turned into some condos near the intersection of Lexington and University. You have the Spruce Tree Center, which is at Snelling and University. You have this really odd, it used to be an insurance building near the corner of Fairview and University. And at the far end of University Avenue, you have both the old International building and the KSTP tower. This building, the brick building, was actually the home of the Overland Motor Car Company back in the 1920s. They built cars in that building. And then KSTP, we are looking, if you look at the front door of KSTP, the right door is in St. Paul and the left door is in Minneapolis. It straddles the cities, but it has those two big towers in it, albeit made out of metal. And then if you look in other places around Minnesota and St. Paul in particular, you see towers. You see the 3M towers over in Maplewood, and it says they're global headquarters. They're important. You know, that's an important building. You have the Twin Towers in downtown St. Paul that show kind of the center of downtown. And then you have over on the right side here, Cap Wigington's Highland Park Water Tower, which just show that there are other towers that are across St. Paul. So when you're thinking about your Minecraft build and building something out of ice, something that's maybe like an ice palace, I want you to think about how towers can play a role in that. So you see here, we're doing a real close-up view of the 1888 Ice Palace, and count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have the big tower in the middle, 8. Then you have these like minaret things, 9, 10, all sorts of different towers in there. But interesting, over here is the Central Park Presbyterian Tower, steeple. Again, churches use towers, steeples, to show where they are. So there are lots of different ways that you can express the tower out of ice. It could be one big tower. And so here's that Montgomery Ward's building again on the left. And on the right is the 1887 Ice Palace with one huge tower that is the tower that held the flag of the Winter Carnival. But again, if you count them, it's not just one, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, lots of towers to show how royal and how prestigious St. Paul was because the Ice King lived in the Ice Palace. Multiple towers. I think it's kind of interesting, this juxtaposition of the Brown and Bigelow towers that I showed you earlier. Those had like water in them, like I mentioned before. But here in the entryway to the 1886 Winter Carnival and the Ice Palace in the background, you see again 2 towers. What does 2 mean? Well, it means whatever you want it to mean for your Ice Palace build. But in that central tower, that tall tower in 1886, there's that flag, and that flag is actually a white polar bear on a blue background. So if you want to have a waving blue background tower flag, there it is. Let's look at that coffin factory building again. You notice that it's kind of zigzaggy all across here? Well, St. Paul had a zigzaggy ice palace in 1937. The buildings were probably made about the same time and reflect kind of a way that buildings were built in the 1920s and 30s. Now, this is curious. Look at that KSTP tower on the left side. It's those big metal structures. Well, in the 1992 Ice Palace, the people there wanted to add height to these towers, and so they built metal canopies and put canvas on top of it to give it height without necessarily having to make it all out of ice, and added a different material to the building. This insurance building I mentioned earlier down on Fairview, that's massive. It's like big, it's heavy, it shows that it's permanent. And here in the 2002 Ice Palace, you have something that has that same kind of massive, heavy duty kind of look to it. But then you have daring. I look at this pencil skyscraper in New York City, and I go, how can that even stand? It just boggles my mind. And if you look at the right in the Harbin Ice Festival, you see a pagoda and the ruins of the Colosseum in Rome built completely out of ice. That's really daring. How do they do that? I don't have an answer to that. That is like crazy impressive. And so the thing that I want you to imagine is where can you go with this? We looked at a bunch of buildings just now that were a series of towers, and I chose to close with the 1938 ice court, because they wanted to look at something that was completely different. And what is crazy imaginative about this is behind the two discs are a series of light fixtures that at night would light up the discs in kind of like a sunburst. And maybe your ice palace will have some sort of ice embedded inside the ice as it's being frozen, or maybe it's wrapping around the outside of it. I don't know. That's why I'm saying, where will your imagination take us? Imagine something that has never been thought of before. That's what would be really fun.
Well, that was excellent. That was super informative and very cool. I
Does it?
have a couple questions here
Yep.
from our listeners then to kind of close us out with a short Q&A if that's all right. Um, so our first question is kind of a logistical one. Ice is slippery as a material. That's what it's best known for. We skate on it, we sled on it. Um, and so this player was wondering, how do you keep people from slipping as they walk through an ice palace?
Ah, a good question. I would say the real answer to that is you don't stop them from slipping. This palace, the 1938 palace that we have up on the screen, you can see there are ice steps walking up there. And actually, I have a photograph of this building with my dad in front of it. And he said it was just treacherous. You walked up there and you fell down. And so there are some things you can do. You don't slip so much on snow. And so if there's a flat surface that people are going to be walking on, you could pack it down with snow. You see the Christmas trees in the background on some of these areas. Well, you could kind of line the walkways with pine boughs or sawdust. That's a good solution. But anything that is like dirt or gravel or something, those are heat attractors. As soon as the sun hits, a gravel or a hard surface, it's going to heat that up faster than the snow and the ice, and it'll just become ice on top of it. So that's to be avoided.
That makes sense, especially because our other anti-slip functions, sand and salt particularly, they work by melting the ice rather than adding
Exact
more grip.
evil material.
Oh, let's see. All right, so then our next question is another logistical one. And this is mostly about the size, especially as our builders are creating, towers that have to stand up very tall. These are first and foremost engineering feats. Um, and so this player was curious about how the foundation of an ice palace might differ from the foundation of, say, a house. Um,
Ooh, really good question. Most houses in Minnesota have basements. And so those basements are dug out from the earth, and they actually go below the surface of the lawn around the house or apartment building. And that's because the foundation has to go down and rest on something that never freezes. And so if you go down about 4 feet, under the dirt here in Minnesota, you will hit dirt that never freezes. It'll be really cold. It'll be 34 degrees or 40 degrees, but it's not freezing. And so that keeps that building from tilting or shifting because it's built on solid dirt underneath the foundation. The good thing about ice palaces is we don't really have to worry about them shifting around much because they're up for such a short period of time. And the time that they're up is in the middle of winter when the dirt is supposedly, and this is a good year to talk about this, the frost is really deep in the ground because we don't have snow cover. And so the frost is really down into the ground, 36, 40 inches right now, making it a perfect foundation for a building to be built on. Now, in the 1886 Ice Palace, they actually had to pour a concrete slab underneath it because it was built on some really poor soil in the middle of Lake Phelan. In the middle of the lake, Phelan. I mean, it's just crazy. So they had to build a big concrete pad, again, 36 inches below the ground, to hold up the weight of that building.
Oh, that begs the question, what happened to the concrete pad after the Ice Palace was gone?
It's still there.
Oh, you can go see it?
Nope, it's 36 inches below the surface. There might even be trees planted on it now.
Oh, wow.
But there's a monument looking over the island in Lake Phelan where it talks about where the Ice Palace was. And so you can go down and visit that site, but it'll be just a flat piece of dirt.
That's how a lot of history ends up sometimes. You end up with a site that's just flattened, and
Yep.
then you visit to think about the thing, but alas, it's gone. That's really interesting. All
It's
right.
in your imagination. Again, look at what I used in
Yeah.
the last word of the presentation. Where will your imagination take us? It's just, you have to imagine that it when you go to a site where there was an ice palace, you kind of look around and say, this once had a 126-foot tall building on it, and it lasted 2 weeks. That's pretty weird, but it's really cool. It's very imaginative.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that leads us to our last and probably our most fun Q&A question.
All right.
When people went to the carnival, and came to see these ice palaces, what kind of food were they eating? Was there we have our state fair food. Is there carnival food that we could have expected to see at these in, say, 1880?
Wow. I have never been asked that question, Sarah. In those early buildings in 1886, 87, and 88, they were built in Central Park, and there were no food vendors there. There were activities there, but that location is kind of near where the Capitol was, and people would walk down from Carnival Park, where the ice palaces were, into downtown, where there's just a whole bunch of restaurants. And some of them would be like your equivalent to the 5-star restaurants today. And some of them would be just like the Coney Island, where you get a hot dog and some fries. And so those things were all available within walking distance. But yeah, I don't know if there were ever any food vendors at ice palaces. I do know that in some of the carnivals in the 70s and 80s and 90s here in St. Paul, the 1986 palace, they had alcoholic drinks that they served to people to keep them warm. I do know that.
Such is the way of things.
Yes.
Well, that's extremely informative, and I'm hoping that satisfies our players who asked some wonderful questions.
In my opinion, is hot dogs are always a good option.
This is true. A hot dog could probably heal any disease if you were out in the cold long enough.
It's exactly right. It might even preserve your body, as far as I know.
Oh, excellent. I must add a disclaimer that neither of us are medical doctors. We're historians and having fun. Right. Well, with that, thank you so much, Bob, for this incredible lecture and this great discussion. As always, this was super informative, and I'm so excited to see what our players build.
Me
Uh,
too.
yeah, and to all our players, please remember that the competition is January 25th from 2 to 5 p.m. You can play in person or online. In-person players will have access to direct moderator support as well as snacks. We look forward to seeing you all, and I am so excited to see what you all build. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at the competition.
Bye.